Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we're back with another React video, and today we're going to be checking out more extra history. We're going to be continuing the series on Justinian and Theodora. I was going to get around to this episode a little bit earlier, but a certain Oversimplified put out a couple videos, so this got pushed back a little, but we're here. And we're back with more Justinian, minus the Justinian seemingly, because we barely have seen him over the past handful of episodes, and even less so with Theodora. At least the specter of Justinian has been looming over the events that have been going on here. We haven't seen all that much Theodora. Like, this title feels like it's a little bit deceptive, but whatever, man. I'm sure we're gonna get to them eventually. There's 12 episodes in the series or whatever, so it's gonna have to happen at some point. We're at 8, we still have plenty more time. So, I'm excited, as always, because I've really been liking this series. I'm loving this arc. It's just lacking a little bit in the main characters. It turns out the side characters are actually the main characters. Alright, let's get started.
Mediolanum had fallen. Its catastrophic destruction reverberated through Italy, and then through the entire Roman world. Belisarius penned a letter to his lifelong friend in the East,
Hey, it's
Justinian.
him.
There was an anger to this letter that Justinian had never seen from his friend. The letter laid out just how this tragedy came to be, and just who was at fault. Justinian immediately recalled Narses, and with the order to recall Narses, he sent another letter. There would be no equivocation this time. All of Italy would know Belisarius was in command. And with a semblance of unity restored to the army, one by one the remaining Ostrogothic strongholds fell. By this,
There is this sort of question here. Was it Belisarius's fault, though, that his power was ever in question? Could he have asserted his power a little bit more? It's hard for me to tell from the little bit that I got here, but it felt weird that Narses was able to assert as much power as he did. It felt like Belisarius kind of rolled over for him at first, and then it got worse because of that. Having people question your authority over what is essentially fine print or a loophole, it clearly feels cynical. I don't know. I don't know if that was like a goof on Belisarius just not asserting his rightful power, because he knew he was in charge. He knew this was BS. But I understand that people liked Narses to a degree. There was a little bit of division in the army, and he didn't want Narses to somehow screw him over, but damn, man, it just feels like none of that should have ever happened.
spring of 540, Belisarius was at last at the gates of Ravenna. Victory was so close.
Maybe it's Justinian's
He laid
fault.
siege to the city, and
Make
when
it clear.
Vitiges' nephew came to lift the siege, he sent John, who, yes, was still in service, to capture the towns to the east, where the families of most of the soldiers of Vitiges' nephew's army lived. As word of this passed through the enemy ranks, the army melted away almost overnight. With no chance of rescue, Vitiges began to negotiate his surrender. But even as he and Belisarius began to talk terms, there was a shift in the wind in the east. Back in Rome, Justinian looked out over his city. A new capital. Not just because Constantine had founded it when Rome began to fail, but because he had reforged it. The Hagia Sophia stood complete. The palace was more magnificent than it had ever been. And soon his new capital would rule over the old homeland. He had retaken Africa, and now Italy. Perhaps one day he would reconquer Hispania. A messenger woke him.
So his new capital is going to rule over the old homeland. I hope I'm following this correctly. So he's not going to be moving back into Rome, because that's one of the questions I had this whole time. Is the reconquering of Rome an attempt to create a new, more symbolic, historically relevant capital? Because that doesn't feel necessarily practical for him to move back in this place that hasn't had an emperor rule from it in a very, very long time. So I'm glad we're getting into that, because that's been looming over this whole thing. How hard does the symbolism of Rome push him even to do impractical things? But it doesn't seem like he is going to be doing that.
From his reverie. A letter. It took him but a minute to read what it said. Then he ordered, "Pen, paper, quickly. Fetch the senators Domnicus and Maximin." In that instant, those dreams of empire left his mind. Now he was a man trying to balance on a knife's edge. Vitiges had not been idle. While they'd been closing the noose on him, he had written to the Persians in one last desperate gamble. He had told them how much of the Byzantine force was tied down in Italy. And now that eternal peace, that peace that he, Justinian, had paid so dearly for, was coming to an end. 2 senators rode up to the command tent of Belisarius's camp. It was strange. They lacked the usual baggage and hangers-on of senators. Their entourage was only a small bodyguard to get them through the ravaged countryside. Belisarius bade them enter, and asked why they'd come. "War has come to the east," they said. "You're needed in Constantinople at once. We bring the Emperor's terms for the Ostrogoths. We've gotten Vitiges to agree. Now your signature is all that remains."
So I don't know exactly how powerful the Persians are now. I mean, they're not at, like, their peak, are they? So, like, I don't know exactly where they stand. It's clearly a significant threat, but I feel like I'm going to need a little bit more background in order to appreciate the power of the Persians. Like, the scale of this threat. It feels like a big deal, and because it probably is, but I'm just not sure what it means.
Belisarius took the paper they offered him, the peace agreement they had just given to Vitiges, and with each line he read, he became more and more filled with rage and disbelief. Vitiges would remain king of the Ostrogoths. The Ostrogoths would get to keep all land north of the Po. They wouldn't even be seizing all of the Ostrogothic treasury. This was outrageous. He had committed so many years of his life to this fight. He hadn't battled starvation, fought against insubordinate commanders, and sacrificed the lives of countless men just to give up now. Not now. Not when they were days away from achieving everything that they had planned so many years ago. He turns
Don't let
to
him
the
take
senators.
this from you, B-Dog.
Sign it. I don't believe these terms came from Justinian. Without an order directly from him to sign such a piece of ignominy, my pen will never touch that page. He knew full well that even if Justinian actually wished him to sign it, it would take weeks, perhaps months, for such an order to arrive, and by then he would have already crushed Ravenna. But as word of his rejection spread through the camp, one by one his generals came to tell him that they disapproved of his rejection of an imperial decision.
No.
And so he called a great council of his generals and asked them if they would have him approve of such a deal.
Why couldn't he have had this, like, assertive nature before when people were undermining him and he was in the right? Now he has this assertive nature when it seems that, like, despite his good intentions, he is defying an order that has larger geopolitical consequences.
Unanimously, they said yes. And he said that exonerated him from any future troubles that may come from not defeating the Ostrogoths. He summoned the senators back and offered to sign, but the damage was already done. Word of his refusal had not only passed through his camp, but made it to the halls of Ravenna. The Ostrogoths now suspected a trap. If Belisarius, the only Roman they saw as honorable, refused to sign, something must be wrong. And then, slowly, an idea made its way through the ranks of the Ostrogothic nobility. What if they were to go back to the old ways, the ways that came before the reign of the Ostrogothic kings? After all, Vitiges had failed them, and the royal ancestral line of the Ostrogoths was nearly lost. What if, instead, they raised a new man to once again become the emperor of Western Rome? And soon this idea took root, and secretly the Ostrogothic nobility sent out a messenger to Belisarius, the Roman they trusted most, the man they respected on the battlefield and off. They offered him the crown of Western Rome. Even Vitiges, when he discovered this plot, urged Belisarius to say yes. And so Belisarius called together all of his commanders and the senators from Rome, and posed to them a question. If I could, without assaulting the city or wasting one more life, capture Vitiges, bring all of Italy under imperial dominion, and bring the entire Ostrogothic treasury back to Constantinople, would you support me? And around the room, he got a resounding yes.
Okay, that feels like you're leaving out some details here, buddy. Is your ego starting to get... I didn't understand, like, the significance of Belisarius, but maybe he's more important than I originally thought he was.
Yes. And so he agreed to the Ostrogothic proposal and marched his army into Ravenna. But once inside the walls, he exposed his real intentions, to claim Italy for Justinian, to seek the royal treasury, and to bring Vitiges captive back to the east.
I was liking him.
He made sure that...
It's not like I like Justinian and his loyalty to Justinian, like, anchors my opinion to him. No, but, like, there is a general trustworthiness that I have kind of appreciated in Belisarius. He seems like a very good hand, and I kind of respect that about him. If he turned on that, then I would have felt a little bit funky about the whole thing. That's a huge part of what endeared him to me. Independent of Justinian. He could have been working under anybody, and it would have been kind of an endearing level of loyalty and trustworthiness that he's had.
That no further Ostrogoths were harmed, that no looting was done, and that no property other than the royal treasury was seized. But even so, the Ostrogothic nobility was stunned. Here was the noblest of the Romans lying to them, breaking an oath to them, treating them in bad faith. The Ostrogoths raised up a new leader, but even he pled with Belisarius to take the throne of Italy for himself. Once more, Belisarius refused.
He might have been a good ruler.
5 years after Belisarius had first sailed for Sicily, Italy
What could have happened?
Justinian's dream was complete. But in the end, it had not been captured by force of arms. It hadn't submitted to an honorable peace or even fallen to a noble ruse. Instead, in those last few hours, it had fallen to broken oaths and bad faith. And there are always consequences for broken oaths and bad faith. Some are felt soon after, others are...
But, like, yeah, I guess in one sense it was not the most honorable way of doing it, but it's also, like, more honorable in my eyes to do it that way than to turn on your original intentions, or, well, to turn on the man that you've been serving through this whole thing. So... man, but I'm curious how this is actually going to come back on him.
Buried as seed that sprout only in the darkest winter. And as Belisarius sailed home at last, his longtime friend sat in his palace, feeling suspicion and the pain of betrayal. The East was in turmoil. The border regions were already at war, and it was all because the man he trusted most in the world had disobeyed him. When his need was near...
Yeah, okay. It's weird. It is really, really weird. Like, there are layers to this. Like, I understand what he's going... I don't know. He's definitely wrong in a lot of ways here. It's just... I was having a little trouble following it, but now I'm conflicted about the whole thing. Clearly, this is going to have greater geopolitical consequences than it may have been worth if they had taken it. Like, I don't know how much they actually needed any of this beyond the symbolic meaning that's given to it. But also to pull him back. It's also kind of lame after all that he's put into this campaign, but also it's not about Belisarius. This is bigger than Belisarius, so I don't know. It's kind of selfish, but also kind of selfless, because he's doing it for Justinian in a very selfless, loyal way, but while betraying him in another capacity. I don't know if he, like, genuinely believed that Justinian would never have given that order. I think he understands that it's real.
Nearest, it seemed he could not count on anyone but Theodora. This friend, this man that was nearer to him than a brother, had allowed one of the mightiest empires in the world to threaten Byzantium, to sate his own ego and ambition. The Ostrogoths had been broken. They could have always been conquered a few years down the line. But those months, those precious months that Belisarius had spent on the vanity of a complete conquest, those months might cost them everything. His legions and his best generals, they were all in Italy. Byzantium herself stood exposed and undefended. And then there was the matter of the crown. What was he to think of the fact that Belisarius had accepted the Western crown? Sure, he had betrayed the Ostrogoths and told them all that he would never take a crown while Justinian lived, but he had accepted Imperium, and that does something to a man. And he had betrayed Justinian to do so. And what of the fact that clearly people thought he was suited to be emperor? How do you put such a man at the head of armies? How do you trust such a man without reserve? And so, with these doubts, and with bad faith built on good intentions,
layers here.
The cracks begin to grow.
A lot of layers.
Join us next time as the two greatest empires in the Western world come to blows, and the cracks begin to ripple outward.
Dude, man, that was a complicated one. Like, I'm actually, like, this has so many layers to it. I'm really liking it. Belisarius, I'm attached to way more than I am to Justinian at this stage in the story, and it's very easy to get attached to him because, like, he has been essentially the main character in Justinian's story. I don't know. I feel like it's a big question of, do the ends justify the means? But, like, in the end, the ends were not what Justinian was going for. Justinian was pulling back from the ends. So maybe it kind of flips that question a little bit here. Damn, that's I'm gonna have to get into the next episode real soon. I have a few things that I've been overdue to check out. I have to get back into Historia Civilis. I gotta finish up the Alexander the Great series. So I'm probably gonna be doing that next, or like soon after this. But I really want to know what direction this is going, because I'm struggling with it. I would like to be able to predict this stuff, but like it's really feeling quite dynamic. This is added an extra layer of complexity to the issue of loyalty in the ranks here that I didn't think was going to be there. So that's pretty cool. All right. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back with another one of these pretty soon. All right. Thank you.